Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be reviewing this article and pointing out some distasteful aspects I found in it. And it says Poland's abortion reform stalls as coalition politics clash with campaign promises. The first thing you should know is the law in Poland. So let's look at that. As we can see, currently, risk to life, check. Risk to health, check. Rape, check. Other things, not so much. And the most recent change was fetal impairment, no longer allowed. So if we go back to this article, it mentions at least 6 women have died after being denied since the 2020 ruling. And that's referring to the courts. The courts ruled that it would be unconstitutional in the current law, so they changed it at the start of 2021. So if you notice that discrepancy, that's why. Not really an issue. Human Rights Watch, they made this, and this is what it sources for the 6 women. But the 6 women are not in here. This is not a primary source. I don't know why they sourced this. This was a silly decision. I don't think they should have done that. It does include, a story about Joanna, and she did an abortion, and the doctors told her to do all these things, and I don't know why they did that, but it sounds to me like they probably shouldn't have done that. But it's not related to the law. But they do source this from The Guardian about a woman, and she died after having an abortion. But let's look into why. Let's look into whether the law actually had anything to do with this in question. It says, the first fetus died in the womb on the 23rd of December, but doctors refused to remove it, quoting the current abortion legislation, and her family claim that her state quickly deteriorated. The hospital waited until the heartbeat of the second twin also stopped a week later, and then waited 2 more days before terminating it at the end of December. But she died on the 25th of January after weeks more of deteriorating health, and her family thinks septic shock. I think if we scroll down, her doctors said she could have had mad cow disease. I don't know if I trust these doctors. They seem a bit suspicious in their claims, especially given this last section. She tested positive for COVID before her death. And when she was admitted to hospital, she did not have COVID. So, was the abortion what killed her? The complications in the pregnancy? She's certainly young enough that she's 37. It's not like she's a spring chicken. COVID could still be plenty harmful to someone that's 37. My age, not so much. But they waited well after you could tell that there is going to be harmful things. Both the twins were dead, and they waited 2 more days. I don't know if you can blame the law for that one. But it mentions another woman, and let's read this too. So this woman, she's in the hospital. There's COVID restrictions, so she has to communicate with her phone to her mother, and there's really some tragic stuff in the messages. I'm lying and waiting. Either something happens or I will die. Not a great thing to receive if you're someone's mother. I'm sure that must have been hard for the family. But one thing I want to read here is, although prenatal tests showed that the fetus was at high risk of several abnormalities, her family say Isabella was determined to carry the pregnancy to term and was not considering an abortion. Interesting. Interesting. Now let me read this for you. Following the tightening of abortion law in Poland due to the blah blah blah, there remains only one ground for abortion which would be applied in this case: endangerment of the life or health of the mother. However, it's hard for doctors to apply this in practice. They do not know if they can make the right decision when this real danger occurs. If they carry it out too early, prosecutors can go after them and get 3 years in prison. Now, to me, I don't know what kind of doctors they have, because there is further in this story, if we read here, a spokesperson for the hospital said she was under constant medical care and receiving treatment. These are the procedures. The woman's like an incubator. The baby's suffering too. It has nothing to breathe with, which is what she texted her mother. So I don't know if I trust the spokesperson. I feel like they have a bit of a nested interest, so to speak. I trust the deceased woman's texts here a bit more. So I don't know if you can really blame the law here. It seems like you just had these evil people at a hospital do bad things. And if we go back to the one before this, it'll mention medical malpractice. Malpractice. Yeah, an investigation found medical malpractice led to Isabella's death and the hospital was fined. That's referring to this article, of course. So, a bit misleading about these 6 women. I think, it's true they did die after being denied abortions, but so does everyone after a certain number of years. So I really think they were misleading in that statement. So it mentions here eligible women voting. It went up in recent years. It might have helped the political parties win that are now in power. And let's look at this new coalition it's mentioning. You can see there was a recent vote. And you'll see how things break down here. But so let's look into these parties. The Civic Platform and the New Left, they all voted this way. They voted in favor of the legislation. Meanwhile, Confederates and Law and Justice voted against it. And the PSL and Poland 2055, they make up this coalition. Well, the PSL is both of them. Poland 2055 firmly voted in favor of the legislation, while the PSL, they were a bit split, but they generally voted against it. But there were 4 people that voted for it, and they, I would say, disproportionately. They don't have a ton of seats. 3 people is quite a bit for them. So it didn't get passed by 3 votes. And, Donald Tusk, he says, "I feel very bad that I didn't convince these people to vote the same way I did." Well, that's politics. He's probably just trying to save face for losing this vote. His base is probably not going to be happy he didn't get this through. And let's look at this next thing. It's talking about public opinion. I don't know what the source is for this, and it's in Polish. I can't really read it, but there's I trust this translation to be accurate, I suppose. It says 35 legalize abortion on demand up to 12 weeks. I don't want to click that. 21% want to restore the old law, which is, if you'll read this party, Polish People's Party, the agrarian, they support returning to the 2021 law. This law is more liberal, so to speak. So that's why they voted against it, besides these 4 people and the people that didn't make the vote. 23% call for a referendum, about 14% keep what they currently have or even more restrictions. And also 7 people, doesn't translate it, I assume that's nothing. They don't care, or they just don't know. Now, the national referendums, that's interesting. It's a bit divisive because some people on the left, they think that it could be used to make things more extreme. If these results are accurate, I don't know how they would think that. But let's go back and look at some of the polling on Wikipedia. So, general yes or no, we can see in 2014 most people opposed support for abortion, whatever that means, but gradually now they support it. But if we look here in 2020, which is after 2019, most people support it. But if you add only in certain circumstances, that's the majority. Most people, regardless, say only in certain circumstances. So these are a bit misleading. I would assume this is a more accurate thing, but it lacks nuance. So if we go down here, we can see a bit more details. So what I believe this is the legislation in the question would be the green. And the blue people, they would want more, but they'd still support it. Meanwhile, the green Polish People's Party in the PSL coalition, they're here at the yellow. And it should be noted, less than half of the percentages, though there is a no opinion that's somewhat sizable, is in this section. So it's kind of split halfway. The issue on a public appeal in this 2022 poll, it might have changed. Who knows? But it should be interesting that, the people in the coalition are really turning on the People's Party because they voted for this, when it's still, they're trying to force through something that less than half of the people in the most recent poll wanted to be done. And if you exclude the no opinion, it is basically half and half, I think, given these numbers. But let's keep reading. Yeah, so it mentions here that this is only the first of 4, and PSL, they're going to have their own submission, and given that they're the majority of people that voted against it, there's a good chance that passes. But it should be noted that the president of Poland would veto it because he's a Law and Justice Party. So given that he's going to veto it, and his term ends mid-2025, they're trying to do workarounds. And one of the things they're going to do is change the guidelines for prosecution. And it says here, under these new guidelines, prosecutors are instructed to target organized groups profiting from the sale of abortion pills, but NGOs simply writing about abortion assistance are to be left alone. The guidelines suggest doctors who refuse to terminate pregnancies that endanger patients' health could face criminal charges. Alright, so the NGOs, I'm interested how these people get their money. If you were making money off the sale of abortion pills, could you just give money to an NGO to say exactly what you're going to say? I don't know. That's a concern of mine. And this next part, doctors who refuse to terminate pregnancies could face criminal charges. That does kind of go in this article. There was a doctor, he didn't want to terminate the pregnancy. Well, this one actually is more accurate because she did get hers terminated. It was just late. And, you know, I think it would be helpful in these certain circumstances, but I wonder if it would be taken to be used for more nefarious purposes. I don't know. And I'm not going to talk more about that. I'll leave that to you to decide. Um, Now, it gives a map about the laws. You see Poland's like the only one in Europe that has a vaguely conservative law. Um, Britain's the only one that's not on demand besides Poland. Besides the microstates, they're not really big enough to see or maybe even included at all. It'd be only a pixel. And you can see a look around the world. Doesn't matter. Indiana, we generally have a somewhat more conservative law than Poland. Like I think it's not health, I think it's life, but otherwise generally similar. And if we keep reading, well, this last section, I'm not going to read verbatim, but it basically outlines this sort of hope that because of the events happened in the way that they did, it will, in their opinion, lead to more electoral success for the main opposition party, particularly the one in orange. If we go back to the civic platform. So that's the current state. Now let's talk about how likely it is that they actually have more electoral success in the future. So if we look at the recent elections in Parliament, these were quite recently, 9th of June, we can see that the Civic Coalition are up, big swing in their favor. The United Right, which includes Law and Justice, and the smaller party, which is very Catholic, so to speak, they're a bit down. Though I think this party's on the up, and Law and Justice is just farther down than this number would suggest. You can see Confederation Party, they had a huge swing up, and we can see this Third Way Party, which were mentioned, they had a small swing up, while the left had a huge swing down. So what would this suggest? This does not necessarily bode great for Civic Coalition. I think you could argue it bodes more favorably than disfavorably, but I don't think this gives them the win, because let's look at percentage of vote. So we can reasonably assume that they're going to get, for the sake of the presidency, for which is up next year, they're probably going to get somewhat similar. Of course, things change a little bit, and the left, that they would prefer their presidential candidate to the more right-wing candidate. So they're going to get this 37.1%, give or take, changes. They're going to get the left's percent, give or take, changes. Meanwhile, the right is going to get this 36 and 12. And then there's this 7%, which kind of decides who wins. And the right is currently more ahead if you add these numbers together. And Poland 2050, I think the average voter breaks for this guy, or, well, not him, whoever their candidate will be for president. So they're going to get a little over half of those votes. But then, as we mentioned, go back to here, they have trouble with the Polish People's Party voting against them on this issue. I don't know how many of their voters are going to want to support this. You know, it's a very Christian-orientated group, a very rural voter base, I believe. I think the average voter for Polish People's Party is going to vote against whoever the Civic Coalition offers up. So I think this bodes overall poorly for the Civic Coalition. Now let's look at the local elections. These were a little earlier in April. Let's look what happened. United Right, they lost seats. It should be mentioned, Law and Justice, they probably lost more than 15, but the other person in that coalition, I think, gained some seats. Not a terribly large amount. They're relatively small. But let's look who gained the seats. The Civic Coalition, the Third Way, and Confederation Party. Meanwhile, the left is down seats, and then this independent party is down bigly. Does this bode well? Well, let's look. Overall, Law and Justice are ahead 4% if we're just comparing the two parties. But this one party has a pretty high, notable amount of votes, 14.2%. That's pretty big. And then we add these up. United Right is ahead of the Civic Coalition. They probably get more than half of these votes because Poland 2050 is bigger than the PSL. But I don't think enough break for the Civic Coalition. I think the right wins the next presidential election unless the polling goes in their favor. So we can see this was the last election in Parliament where Donald Tusk won his seat as the Prime Minister. We'll see United Right lost a very big amount of seats. The left lost a lot. Confederation gained a little. If we look at the polling for the next parliamentary election, we can see some movement. So we can see after the election, the Law and Justice Party fell off pretty big, and the Civic Coalition overtook them. But now, I really don't know which way the trend is going to continue from here. Only time can tell. But the Law and Justice Party has been trending better. Meanwhile, the Third Way coalition has completely collapsed and now is under Confederation in polling, which is very bad for Donald Tusk's party, because in the upcoming presidential election, Confederation people, they're gonna all, presumably, some might not, vote for the Law and Justice. Meanwhile, this Green vote was gonna be split between them. Now, why is this Green vote going so bad? They lost 1/3 of their voter base, over 1/3 of their voter base. Well, there's two things I want to bring up here. The fact that there's a coalition between Poland's People Party and Poland 2050, I think, is going to destroy Poland 2050. And this is because there's going to be a lot of headlines that mention the Third Way Coalition. So if you look at the news and you see Third Way Coalition, the Poland 2050, they voted against abortion, right? And meanwhile, you're just a poorly informed voter. You're going to end up voting Civic Platform, which I think is part of the reason they're up while these guys are down. Meanwhile, both the right parties are also up, and the left didn't gain anything. I think the reason the right parties are up is because of these four people. This legislation was not what the Polish People's Party had endorsed. It's not what they're sending forward. And yet these people are free to vote this way, and the party doesn't reprimand them at all. Party said people can vote however they want. We allow individual decisions here, and I think that's a bad look for them. Anyway, this I'm going to put a little meme at the end of this video. That should represent my thoughts on the issue, I guess. See you guys.
I've got a meme here that I put in my stack and I've lost. But man, does it say it all. Can't find it now.